Once upon a time, there lived a miller who had 3 sons. When the old miller passed away, he left his mill to his eldest son, his donkey to the second son, and his cat to the youngest son. The youngest son was quite unhappy with his inheritance. "What am I to do with just a cat?" he sighed. "My brothers can work together and make a good living, but I'll surely starve." To his complete astonishment, the cat replied, "Do not worry, master. Just give me a bag and a pair of boots, and you will see that your lot is not as bad as you think." The young man was so surprised to hear a cat speak that he decided to do as it asked. He found a sturdy bag and had a tiny pair of boots made for his clever feline friend. The cat, now looking quite dapper in his new boots, immediately went to work. He put some bran and sow thistle into his bag, laid it open, and then stretched himself out in a rabbit warren as if he were dead. Soon enough, a foolish young rabbit, smelling the delicious treats, hopped right into the bag. Quick as a flash, the cat pulled the strings tight and caught the rabbit. Proud of his catch, Puss in Boots went straight to the king's palace. He requested an audience and, bowing low before the king, said, "Your Majesty, I have brought you a rabbit from the warren of my master." The Marquis of Carabas, the king, was pleased with this gift. The cat continued this routine for several months, regularly bringing the king gifts of game, always presenting them as gifts from the noble Marquis of Carabas. Of course, this Marquis didn't actually exist. It was a name the cat had invented for his poor master. One day, the cat learned that the king was planning to take a drive along the riverbank with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world. The cat rushed to his master and said, "If you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. Go and bathe in the river at the spot I show you, and leave the rest to me." The young man, trusting his clever cat, did exactly as he was told. As the king's carriage passed by, Puss in Boots began to cry out at the top of his lungs, "Help! Help! The Marquis of Carabas is drowning." The king, recognizing the name of the man who had sent him so many gifts, ordered his guards to rescue the Marquis, while the young man was being pulled from the river. The cunning cat told the king that some thieves had stolen his master's clothes. In reality, Puss had hidden them under a large stone. The king immediately commanded his attendants to fetch a suit from his own royal wardrobe for the Marquis of Carabas, dressed in fine clothes. The miller's son looked so handsome and noble that the princess fell in love with him at first sight. The king, equally impressed, invited the young Marquis to join them in the carriage for the rest of their drive. The cat, delighted with his success, ran on ahead of the carriage. He came across some peasants mowing a meadow. "Good people," he said with an air of authority, "if you do not tell the king that this meadow belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall all be chopped into mincemeat." The peasants were terrified, so when the king's carriage passed and the king asked who owned the beautiful meadow, they all replied in unison, "It belongs to the Marquis of Carabas." Puss in Boots continued running ahead, saying the same thing to everyone he met. He told reapers in the cornfields, workers in the vineyards, and foresters in the woods to claim their lands for the Marquis of Carabas. The king was astonished by the vast and wealthy estate of his new acquaintance. Finally, the cat arrived at a magnificent castle. This castle belonged to a rich and powerful ogre, who was the true owner of all the lands they had just passed through. The ogre was also a magician, known for his ability to transform into any creature he wished. Puss in Boots, knowing this, politely knocked on the castle gate. He was shown in and bowed respectfully to the ogre. "I was passing by," said the cat, "and I could not resist paying my respects to such a famous and powerful ogre. I have heard that you have the amazing ability to change yourself into any animal you choose. For instance, you could become a lion or an elephant." "That is true," said the ogre, quite pleased with the flattery. "And to prove it, watch this." In an instant, he transformed into a roaring lion. Puss in Boots was so frightened that he scrambled up the curtains, which was not easy with his boots on. Once the ogre had changed back to his normal form, the cat climbed down and said, "That was indeed impressive. But I have also heard, though I can hardly believe it, that you can also change into very small animals. For example, a rat or a mouse. I must confess, I think that would be impossible." "Impossible," boomed the ogre, his pride wounded. "You shall see." In a flash, he transformed himself into a tiny mouse scurrying across the floor. This was the moment Puss in Boots had been waiting for. He pounced on the mouse and ate him all up. Just then, the king's carriage arrived at the castle gates. Puss in Boots ran out to meet them, bowing grandly. "Your Majesty," he announced. "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas." The king was amazed. "What? Does this castle also belong to you, Marquis?" he exclaimed. The miller's son, now the Marquis of Carabas, offered his arm to the princess and led her into the grand hall, where a magnificent feast, originally prepared for the ogre's friends, was waiting. The king was so charmed by the Marquis's wealth, his good looks, and his daughter's obvious affection for him that, before the evening was over, he offered the young man his daughter's hand in marriage. The miller's son, who was now a prince, married the beautiful princess and lived in the grand castle. And as for Puss in Boots, he became a great lord and never had to chase mice again, except for fun. And they all lived happily ever after. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more classic tales. See you next time.